Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for day 2 of Aware for All Atlanta. We are so excited to have you here for this important educational program. And if you joined us last night, you know that my name is Hope Vendraselli, and I'm the manager of events and community engagement with CISCRP. CISCRP is the Center for Information and Study on Clinical Research Participation, and we are a nonprofit organization that educates the public about clinical research. We do not conduct or recruit for trials, but we believe that everyone should have the information that they need to be informed about clinical research. And our ability to live healthy, long lives is due in large part to advances in medical treatments and advances that would not have been possible without the participation of volunteers in clinical trials. I want to take this moment to also acknowledge any of our audience members who have participated in clinical research, including many of our panelists this evening. We thank you for your important contribution to advanced medical science and health for all of us. And as a community, we would like to recognize all study volunteers, or as we like to call them, medical heroes. But before we begin, we want to ask for your feedback. So we want to make sure that this program is a meaningful experience, and you will have a few poll questions that are going to pop up on the screen tonight. These poll questions will also be your raffle tickets for our giveaways. And you can also use the Q&A box to engage with our speakers to be entered into the raffle that way. And we have several great raffle prizes tonight, and the way to enter is to be answering those poll questions or submitting questions as mentioned. But we understand that you may want to ask questions anonymously, and you should feel free to do so. But to earn a raffle entry through that Q&A option, we do need to know who you are. So if you would prefer, you can send us an email to awareforall@ciscrip.org. So again, we'd like to know a little bit more about you, and let's just test out the poll feature with a really easy one. And you can see who is participating tonight, or why you're participating tonight, because you want to learn a little bit more about clinical research, because you have a health condition, you want to learn a little bit more about where to sign up for a clinical trial. So answer this question for the next couple moments if you can. It's a big help to us. A couple more minutes here. All right, and thank you to all who were able to answer those. And don't forget that you can still ask questions and answer the other polls that come up tonight for your opportunity to win raffle prizes. So CISCRP was honored to collaborate on this program with many community and research organizations, and they helped to spread the word about the Aware for All program. And you can visit many of them in our informational exhibit center by visiting our website, awareforall.org, and clicking on the Atlanta event. And the Informational Exhibit Center is always open. You can visit it whenever you'd like to learn and explore and share with your friends and family. And this information and other helpful links will also be available in the follow-up email that you will receive after the program. I'd also like to recognize our sponsors and exhibiting groups. For the past few months, these dedicated individuals have helped to organize this week's virtual programs, some of which include the Allergy and Asthma Network, Georgia NCORP, iResearch Atlanta, and Praxis Precision Medicine, and many more. Without your help and support, we could not have developed this program. And you can find that educational content and more information about these groups in the Informational Exhibit Center. And a very special thank you to our Aware Industry Consortium, Biogen, CSL Behring, EMD Serono, Genentech, IQVIA, Janssen, Novartis, Otsuka, Pfizer, and WCG for providing support to bring this educational program to 5 areas this year. Thank you very much for your continued support. And if you have any questions throughout the program, be sure to send us a message in our Q&A box. Our team will be monitoring the chat and will bring up any questions you have during that portion of the program. And you guys should be seeing a poll pop up on your screen right now. Let us know a little bit more about you. Are you participating in this webinar as a member of the public, a member of an exhibiting organization, or a professional involved or associated with clinical trials? Again, by answering these, you're giving us helpful information on ways that we can learn a little bit more about you to improve this program. Have a couple moments here more to answer this poll. Awesome. Well, thanks to everyone who's able to answer. Now, I'd like to welcome our panelists for the evening, all of whom have different backgrounds and perspectives with clinical research. And tonight we have Ashley Nealy, Glenn Bachmann, Melissa Hardman, Terp Vairin, and Tina Berry. And I'm going to invite them all to add their cameras and unmute themselves. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you can see all of them and give them a few moments to introduce themselves before we get started with our panel discussion and kick it off with some of those questions. All right. So Ashley, why don't we kick it off with you? Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey, so good evening, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Ashley Nealy, and I'm a participant in the Pfizer trial here in Atlanta for the COVID vaccine clinical trial.
Awesome. Thanks, Ashley. And Terp, over to you.
Hi, my name is Terp Vairin. I'm an Atlanta nonprofit professional, and I have participated in several trials, mainly for antidepressants, but I also have one for yellow fever and Zika virus vaccines coming up.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us. Glenn, if you can join us and introduce yourself.
Thanks, Hope. So my name is Glenn. I'm in Charleston, South Carolina. I'm a multiple myeloma patient diagnosed February 2020, and I'm currently enrolled in a clinical trial as part of my maintenance program.
Thanks so much, Glenn. Melissa, over to you.
Hey everyone, I'm Mel Hardman, founder of Phases of Research. I've been in the research industry about 10 years, in healthcare about 20 years, and I help to strategize to find patient recruitment, patients for clinical trials, as well as community engagement and bridging clinical science to our patient population.
Thanks. And Tina.
Yes, hi, thank you, Hope. I'm Tina Berry. I work at Northside Hospital as a program development manager. I work in the oncology department, and I actually am the program manager of the Georgia NCORP, which is one of the sponsors. Recently, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I was part of the TMIS trial looking at 2D versus 3D mammography, and was able to diagnose my cancer through that clinical trial. And so very happy to be here to contribute.
Awesome. Thank you all very much. So let's just kick it off. And if we can go back to Ashley. Ashley, I'd love to learn a little bit more about what prompted your interest in participating in a COVID-19 trial.
Yeah, so it was summer of 2020, which seems like so long ago now. And I'm sure we all were trying to figure out what we could do to help in the pandemic. And I was watching a congressional hearing featuring Dr. Fauci, and they were talking about clinical trials for the vaccine, which were already underway. And he had a specific call to action that really resonated with me. He said that a vaccine couldn't be produced without African Americans being involved in trials, especially due to our history of medical racism and all those different things. So I felt like that was speaking to me, and that was a reason why I needed to sign up. And so I decided to try to sign up that next week and got invited to participate in a trial here in Atlanta.
Awesome. Thank you, Ashley. And when you were getting ready to participate in the trial, did you have any concerns before you decided to participate? And how did you work that out, if so, with your study team?
Yeah, so I didn't have any concerns initially. They gave me the informed consent document, and I do want to preface, this is my first time being in a trial, so I didn't know exactly what it was like or the process was like, but everything was really well detailed. So the biggest side effect that they said could happen at that time, of course, with the population that it had before, was just flu-like symptoms, which didn't seem like a really big deal to me versus potentially getting COVID. But after I talked to some of my friends and family, they did make me a little nervous because no one had heard of mRNA at the time. Everything was new. Everyone was considering it to be really rushed, and they made me a little bit scared. But I just had to remember the reason why I signed up, and I decided to just continue with the trial.
That's awesome. Thank you, Ashley. And Glenn, similar to Ashley, did you have any reservations getting involved with your trial? And when you told your friends and family you were participating, what were their thoughts?
Yeah, so I had undergone a stem cell transplant last September, and once you're past 100 days from there, it's time to basically get going on maintenance drugs. And my oncologist at MUSC here in Charleston had discussed with me that normal maintenance is a drug called Revlimid, but he was actually participating in a clinical trial that also paired it up with a second drug called Darzalex. Darzalex is not a new drug, but it's typically offered much later when other forms of therapy have failed or relapsed. But they had seen some really good results on introducing Darzalex as a companion to Revlimid as really a much earlier maintenance type of therapy. So with all I had a million questions, as you might imagine, having never undergone a clinical trial before, but my oncologist was great. He answered all my questions. I wanted to know what the side effects were because I'm a big side effects guy. Efficacy, what could I expect, from a improvement of my condition? What sort of time commitment would I have to make out of my own personal life and work life in order to participate? And also, what would any cost be? Out of pocket to me, or how would insurance deal with a clinical trial? All those questions were answered, lots of information from my oncologist. And I basically left that meeting confident that it was the right thing to do. My wife was there with me. She agreed totally. We explained it to my family and everyone was very supportive of it. So for me, the concerns were pretty much alleviated just by great information from my oncologist.
That's great to hear. And Terp, if we could bring you in, being a part of some mental health clinical trials and some other ones, how was your experience, and did you feel confident with your study team and the group that you were involved with during your trial?
Yeah, so funny enough, I got into the trial by responding to a Facebook ad. And I received a phone call and went through a lengthy, deeply personal interview. And at the end of the interview, I found out that the person that was interviewing me was someone I used to wait tables with back in the day. So that definitely helped, knowing that like the person on the other side actually knew me and cared about me. But when I did end up going to the facility and kind of going through the further tests and screenings, everyone there was so nice and just so competent. And nobody spoke down to me, but everyone was very clear about what was going on. I just felt very cared for, and like it was in their interest to keep me informed, which was comforting. So yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I love to hear that. And kind of bringing in what Glenn was saying before in the terms of, what that might look like for compensation or out of pocket. Did you have any experience with that and the conversations that you were having with your research team?
I had no idea that this would be like a compensated thing. I responded to the Facebook ad because I've had resistant treatment depression my entire life, as well as a slew of other brain soup, as I like to call it. So I was just trying to see if there was something new that could work, and knowing that it was compensated was really nice. I will acknowledge that I have a great amount of privilege and that my job is very accommodating, and was like, please go do something to try to help your brain. But like knowing that if I had to take unpaid time off or something like that, that it would have been compensated was very helpful. iResearch also really goes the extra mile to make sure that their participants can get there. Like I have privilege in that I have reliable transportation. I don't have kids I have to find sitters for, et cetera, et cetera. But like, I've gotten other people to do studies with them. A dear friend of mine was in Athens, Georgia, which is about 2 hours away. And they would actually send Ubers to her and Uber her in from Athens so that she could participate in the trials. So they really go the extra mile to make sure that your participation is not impeded by your lack of transportation, pay, childcare, et cetera, et cetera.
That's awesome. And, that's always something that we encourage people ask their study teams or their doctors if they're considering getting involved, because that can be a barrier to participation and they should know all that information up front. Melissa, if we could bring you in and talking about some of the work that you do, especially in the community, talking about those barriers to participation. If you just want to unmute yourself and kind of share a little bit more about your experience in educating the community, what do you think are some of most effective things that we can do to educate about clinical research?
Yeah, absolutely. And just hearing the panel speak, it reminds me of all of the discussions I've had in the community. Everyone brought up some type of barrier, even with Ashley sort of saying, I've never been in a research trial before. I didn't even know what to expect. I didn't know anything about informed consent. Those are the type of things that I do out in the community with different populations who probably don't get this information. And it's extremely important that there's someone that they can trust, someone that looks like them, someone that, doesn't have on a lab coat and is like, hey, come in here, let me give you this, but just a regular person, sort of like what Terp was saying, hey, I was on the phone with someone and I waited tables with that person. So I try to make sure that, in the community, they understand that even though we're scientists or clinical developers, we are real people. And the end of the day, it's about the patient. And so we're trying to make sure that we're taking our protocols and we're reaching the patient population versus doing it the other way, making you guys come to us. And I can really vouch for iResearch that they do a really good job in making the patient feel comfortable, making sure they have transportation. This is definitely an era in which patient centricity, I'm pretty sure you've heard that word before, is extremely important. And I like to go a little bit further than that and say that we need to focus more on patient inclusivity and not just centricity, because inclusivity is an action word. So we need to make sure what those barriers are per population and try to make sure that we mitigate those, such as transportation, finding care for your loved ones. All those things come into play. So those are really top barriers, and those are a lot of conversations that I have with the public.
Awesome. And what would you say some of the biggest misconceptions that you come across most often?
That research is not for everyone, that it's a particular creed, if you will, or socioeconomic status or ethnicity that we're shooting for when we're doing clinical studies. And really the reality is, if we don't include everyone, then everyone doesn't get well. I often hear a lot of people say, well, oh, that drug doesn't work for us, or, my grandma had cancer and she didn't survive, but that person's grandma had cancer and they did, and they were in a clinical study. What we need to understand is we need all ethnicities. We need everyone in clinical studies. Everybody's bodies are different. Our biochemistry are different. Biomarkers are different. And if we don't have all that inside of these research studies, then we're really making drugs for the people that are in the studies. So I also always advocate for everyone, children, adults, no matter what. If you feel like someone that can be in a clinical trial, try it out. Ask questions. Go to your doctor. Ask them. Go to clinicaltrials.gov. And then if you think about, you're actually doing a justice for those that are coming after us. Maybe this drug is not going to be hitting the market right now, because it does take a long time, but think about your grandchildren or your children's children and the drug hitting the market then, and you're helping them. So yeah, it's definitely an ongoing giving back situation. And it's definitely one of those continuing conversations that we have to have.
That's awesome. And Tina, I'd like to bring you in because I know you can, I'm sure, share perspectives on this, being both part of the professional and trial participant side. Was there anything that, you can add to Melissa, but anything that you were maybe surprised as in joining your trial, being on the professional side previously?
I think, I definitely agree with what Melissa said. Wanting to have a diverse population participating in the trials, but then I thought, well, why not me? I'm working with the clinical research, I should join and participate where I can. I'm working in oncology, I, at the time, really didn't have an opportunity to participate in all of the, active treatment trials. And so really looking for something where I could contribute. This was a way to join a trial that's doing, that's looking at screening. And so as soon as the trial came up within our network and at Northside, I thought this is a perfect opportunity for me to practice what I preach, which is, where you can participate and join in and give back. So I was really fortunate that I was eligible for the trial, and, that I'm fortunate enough that it was an easy ask for me to do that. I work at the hospital. It was easy for me to get to the mammography center, and I was randomized. And so that was a little bit of a concern that I had was, am I going to get randomized, to a 2D mammogram versus 3D? And I, accepted that risk of just, this is part of the study, is they don't know whether 2D is better than 3D. That's the whole point of it. I don't want to, overdiagnosis as an issue in the country. Cost that you're paying for a study that maybe you don't need. And so I was really, just thankful that I was able to participate.
That's awesome. And how did you feel your experience was with the study team, considering that you're a part of the network that you were
Yeah, it was
doing your
neat.
trial with?
Yeah, it's kind of neat because I knew the research nurse. I worked with the, with the research department. They were kind and, really generous and with their time and not assuming that I knew everything. I went through the consent form just like anybody else, answered the questions just like anybody else. And so I really felt supported. I didn't, feel like they were glossing over anything. And, really they held me to the protocol just as they would anybody else, needing to come in within a certain time frame, not, putting me with everyone else when it comes to reaching out and participating that way. So really, really good work there.
Awesome. And I love to hear that, that you felt supported. And one of the questions we get a lot is, how someone might find out about a trial. Most people feel that they are going to be asked by their doctor, but more often than not, they aren't. And obviously Terp mentioned that she found her trial in an untraditional way on Facebook. And Glenn, actually, I'd love to bring you in because I know your personal life actually helped to get you into your trial. If you can speak a little bit more about the work that you were doing that helped you find the trial that you participated in.
Yeah, so I had long been a volunteer for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society as a part of their team and training program. So I was kind of a marathon guy 15 years ago or so. So in a weird twist of irony, I wound up with a blood cancer myself. But I was kind of hooked into that whole LLS network and had become aware. Ultimately, I was told about my specific trial by my oncologist, but I had really become aware through LLS's website and other resources that clinical trials were really a thing. One of my biggest misconceptions about clinical trials was that they involve like super experimental, like drugs and therapies, like science fiction stuff, right? And I was surprised to find that basically the trial that I'm in is likely to become the standard of care very shortly. So it's really not like out there. Certainly there's risks and everything, but that was something to kind of clear up in my own head.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ashley, I know you mentioned that you heard or were interested because of what you were hearing on the news. So how did you go about finding the trial exactly?
Yeah, I originally went and signed up on the COVID Prevention Network site, but I think I was screened out for that particular trial. And then I actually got targeted like Terp on a Facebook ad. And I just signed up, wasn't sure if they were going to contact me or not, but they did about 2 hours later after signing up. So now I'm always getting ads. Now I think I'm in the network, so I'm always getting calls about different trials. So it's something I probably plan to do going forward too.
Oh, that's awesome. I love to hear that. So I think that's a great thing to hear. And Melissa, I know, like you said, there's a lot of misconceptions in the community. So what would you say to people who you speak with who, they're comfortable with what you're saying? What should their next steps be? Where can they find trials in the area? And what's your biggest piece of advice to them?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So kind of piggybacking off of Ashley and Glenn, I've actually helped to put some of those Facebook posts and social media campaigns together. So they are always popping up. That's sort of a new trend now since everybody's going viral. But clinicaltrials.gov, also not being afraid to ask your doctor about different out-of-the-box type treatments if something isn't happening for you, because your staff is probably aware of research studies that are going on. And I've often found during engagement, because I also engage with study teams as well to help them sort of be a bit more comfortable speaking with patients that they typically wouldn't talk to patients about trials. To ask about those trials, see if there's anything for them, and then kind of challenge them, ask them, hey, is there something for me? Is there something outside of this, especially if you aren't finding relief in the area that you have the indication in and nothing's working. But also sort of when you're going onto the internet and you're Googling and all those things, just make sure that your sources are valid. Going to Facebook, make sure that those type of campaigns are valid, and you'll sort of know based on, when they're reaching out to you. And sort of the strategy that I do give my study teams is making sure that you reach back out to patients within 48 hours. If you don't, we're most likely to lose you. Because of course, if you're trying to do something and nobody's reaching back out, it's like, is this really real? Is this spam? So we want to make sure so that's really good actually that they reached out to you as fast as they did. So kudos to that team. But yes, just make sure you take ownership of your own health, because that's really what clinical trials is. It's just another option for healthcare. It's the same thing. It's just going another route. And so when we think about, hey, what treatment can I take? I'm taking aspirin for a headache. I need all of these things. They all went through clinical trials, right? So another misconception is, sort of like Glenn said, oh my gosh, they're doing all of this, experimental things and it's not normal and it's like out of this world. No, it really is regular things that we need, that we're ailing with, that we need to take care of. So I try to remind people when they're thinking about, getting treatments, like, hey, you're having a headache. Did you take an aspirin today? It didn't just fall off a truck. Like, we really had to go through trials for that. So just, if we can make sure that clinical trials becomes normal, so to speak, like a normal healthcare option, I think that we'll continue to move in the direction where everyone feels comfortable participating in a trial.
Yeah, and Terp, I see you nodding your head in agreement with everything everyone's saying. So when, in your experience, and you found this trial on Facebook and you felt comfortable with your study team, would you say that this is something you would be in agreement to participate again, whether with the iResearch team or with another team?
I research, ride or die, with them for life. Love them so much. I will say, like, I was in kind of a weird experimental trial, Glenn. One study I was in, the first one I got involved with, was we were testing not ketamine itself, but like a relative of ketamine, something very chemically close to it. And this was before S-ketamine hit the market. They were being tried kind of at the same time. So I was really curious and I was doing some research around it. And there were a lot of people that were offering ketamine trials where you paid to be in the trial. And like, knowing what I knew after going to iResearch, I was like, that is scammy AF. So like, going back to kind of checking on the legitimacy of the trial and the legitimacy of the organization, it seems like most of the legitimate trials have like a university or an institution behind them, and all of the scammier ones I was looking into were like, I'm a therapist and I'm doing this study. You seem like a dude in an office. So yeah, just knowing there's an institution behind that. The next one I'm doing, the yellow fever vaccine, is through Emory, and that was kind of one of my, Emory is Emory, of course they're legit, but also like they reached out within 3 days. iResearch reached out within 2 days. There were academic credentials behind them. There's, a history of academics. You can look up studies that have their names on them. So yeah, just, I didn't occur to me that that could be an area of concern, but like after looking into that ketamine trial, it's something to look into. But I also think that one was particularly prone to people trying to capitalize on it because ketamine does have recreational use. So
Sure.
It's probably more of a concern with the trials that could be more fun.
Sure. That's great. And Tina, on your kind of professional side of what you do, what's some of the things that your organization does to help to both destigmatize research, but also promote diversity and getting more inclusivity in the department?
I think it's important to have diversity within your department so that your research nurses also, that you have inclusion and diversity within your own organization. And so I think that that's a huge benefit and value for patients to really feel comfortable with their research team. We do also a lot of education for the physicians on inclusivity and offering trials to their patients. We focus on our own disparities to care, to look at where we have areas that need more focused research. We work with our community outreach department to provide education to certain, partners that we have that maybe don't understand clinical trials and don't understand the benefits of participation, and alleviating some of those myths that are out there that are valid, concerns from history, and really trying to, demystify clinical trials. So there's definitely, we have a whole committee within the Georgia NCORP that's focused on disparities to care, and looking at ways that we can, offer clinical trials to all of our patients, and to get that participation.
Awesome. And, of course, COVID-19 has been a huge topic over the last year or so. Was there any, how did that affect your participation, if at all? Was there communication with your study team, if anything was going to change when, we had lockdowns and stuff across the country? What did that look like for you?
So for me, I joined the trial just before COVID. And so it really, at first didn't really affect me that first year. But what it did do is, because of COVID, I was a little more hesitant to getting out, to getting my mammograms done. And being on the trial, they encouraged me to go ahead and come in and get my screening, to stay, adhere to protocol. And, in the end, it may have saved my life, because essentially I would have put off my mammogram. I wasn't really doing it. I wasn't coming in, and they diagnosed my cancer, fairly early, and it's aggressive type, triple negative breast cancer, very, invasive, and the potential for it to spread is really high. And so really it kept me adhering to those, good standards of care for a screening. And I think in the long run, it really may have saved my life, or at least prevented me from having more advanced staged cancer. Everybody was, following protocol when it comes to COVID, and, we had masks on. They definitely cleared out the mammography center, and we followed all of those, precautions to make sure that we were still safe as we went through, the screening. But
awesome. And Glenn, I know you mentioned you were diagnosed in 2020 early on. Was there any conversation amongst your study team or our Leukemia Lymphoma Society about how things might change in the wake of COVID?
Yeah, well, for a while there, they were kind of pushing out the stem cell transplant procedure, just due to the risk of catching COVID in a very, so basically you're immune compromised quite a bit, and I still am. So it remains a concern. But once they felt it was safe, they did move ahead with the transplant. As far as the trial that I'm in, it involves a once a month drive over. It's about a 30-minute trip over to MUSC in Charleston. At times it was one of the few reasons I would actually leave the house, but
Sure.
It was very important to keep it going. Both the guidelines for the trial, very precisely timed infusions and things like that, but also, it's my road to wellness here. The trial has been great for me. It's really brought my numbers down to basically an undetectable number. So it's been highly successful for me. And, COVID has definitely raised worries and stuff, but we're careful. I'm very satisfied with how my hospital deals with COVID and their precautions and all that. So it's all been good.
Awesome. Thank you. And Melissa, with, of course, COVID going on and the encouragement for more diversity in trials, what has the response been from the community that you speak with about getting involved, especially right now?
The good thing is COVID has really opened up, if you can see the silver lining, COVID has actually opened up different options, different routes. It's kind of made us in the clinical research industry think outside of the box as well. And we know that everyone's already afraid. And so the community's number one concern I've seen is, I don't want to leave my house. I don't want to go already into a place where I feel like there's sick people for a study. And so we've had to adapt to that. And the research industry has done a really good job of adjusting our protocols, moving to a virtual type or split, if you will, platform where our patients are actually being seen in their home, or they're being seen in a place where they don't have to actually go to the site. So more of a hybrid study. And it seems as if it's working. I think, you have to kind of take out those roadblocks that you'll have, some of the, making sure that those patients remain anonymous, making sure that their, neighbors aren't seeing all of these white vehicles pull up to their homes and like, what's going on over there? So we make sure that when we're building these protocols and these processes, that things stay very, very, very autonomous, very in and out, very patient centric, because we know, sort of like Glenn or Ashley or Tina, everybody on the panel, you guys have normal lives, right? And so if we're coming into your home to do a site visit or a screening visit, we want to keep that as normal as possible. We want you to be able to live your life the way that you were living it before you started this study. And so COVID has actually helped us learn how to do that a little bit more. And our patients are beginning to trust that. So I've been a part of a lot of mobile home visits, if you will, sort of building processes for that. And because we can show case studies where it's working, the population and the community are responding in a positive manner. And I think that this will continue to be a trend even after COVID, because we're seeing that is working. So a lot of protocols are being built with sort of home visit in the protocol, just in case, something like this happens again, or there's another outbreak, or, patients just can't get to you. So now that we know that we can do this in home, or we can do this anywhere, it's actually become a positive thing. So I don't know if we can say thank you to COVID for that, but we're definitely thinking outside of the box, and it's working. So.
That's great to hear. And Terp, were there any challenges that you had when you were getting involved with your trial, whether during that pandemic or before that even? What would you say some of the biggest challenges, but also some of the biggest benefits that you might have encountered?
My research kind of shut down doing some studies. They weren't recruiting as much in the early days of the pandemic. They did reach a point where they felt pretty secure with everything. And I started a borderline personality disorder study with them early last year. And, it was honestly the one kind of medical facility that I did feel safe in, because they weren't seeing regular patients. It's a dedicated research facility. And everyone there was taking it so seriously. Like, they started double masking before the CDC recommended it. They, by the time I got there, they had like placards up. So like, even though the rooms were kind of small, there was a sheet of plastic between you. They had adjusted their ventilation procedures. So like, they were taking it very, very seriously. I think I saw a repair person walk in without a mask on, and like 3 nurses stopped him and were like, no, that is not what we do here. And Dr. Johnson, who is one of the lead doctors there, writes like a weekly update on COVID, and I really trust what she has to say about it. So yeah, research was great in the beginning before we really knew how it was spreading, what was going on, just because I felt so safe there. And I was being seen regularly by a medical team. Like, they kind of took care of my other more routine medical things just because I was there and they could do them. So I didn't have to go to a doctor's office where people might go because they're sick. And, they made it very clear throughout. I had to sign a lot of different consent forms throughout that study, because like, well, we might have to start giving this to you in your car and then doing phone interviews, or we might have to send it to your house and do phone interviews. So they were being proactively flexible in how to handle changing conditions while just taking it seriously and being safe in their facility.
Awesome. And Ashley, being a part of your very first trial as a COVID-19 trial participant, what's the biggest piece of advice that you might give an audience member who's either hoping to participate in a COVID trial or any kind of trial?
Yeah, so what was interesting about my trial, which I didn't know, was that there was a chance that you may not get the actual vaccine. I thought I was signing up to get it. So definitely, do research about if it's a double-blinded study or not. I think some are different that way. So that was the biggest thing for me. I thought I was definitely getting it, but then they told me that it's not guaranteed, but I kind of knew I got it because of my side effects that I had after the first shot. But that was the biggest thing for me. And then also, as Terp mentioned, since they call us volunteers, I didn't know it was compensated. So I wasn't, of course, signing up for the money, but it definitely helps and becomes an incentive too. So I kind of joke around with people. It's like, the COVID vaccine is free, but I actually got paid to take it, a little bit earlier than people. So that's something that I was interesting to me and that I didn't know before I joined the trial.
Awesome. And so we've been getting a couple questions in from the audience. I'm going to open it up for some of these questions right now. And one of the questions, and I know we talked about this a little before, is where someone might be able to find trials near them, whether that's in the Atlanta area or another area of the country. So Tina or Melissa or really anybody on the call, what places would you recommend they look for that information?
iResearch and Emory are the two that I would recommend the most in the Atlanta area. iResearch is right in downtown Decatur. You can step off the MARTA train line and get right there. Emory also has a station, and they also advertise heavily. So in the Atlanta area, definitely recommend those two.
I was
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say it's also important to whatever the indication is that you're looking for the clinical trial. If it's oncologist, if it's hematology, internal medicine, if you can look that up and kind of Google what the indication is, and typically go to one of those nonprofit organization websites, any type of patient group, Google those. They typically will have either clinical trials posted on those sites to sort of guide patients to those sites, or you can go to clinicaltrials.gov, sort of pull up what that clinical trial is, and it will give you all kinds of information. What happened in preclinical? Do you think it'll be something for you? And so you'll get really valuable information there.
Yeah, I agree with what Melissa said, and clinicaltrials.gov is definitely, a source of good information for government trials. And Georgia Core is an organization, and they have a website that you can look up clinical trials. It's across Georgia, and they are very inclusive of what clinical trials they're available for various oncology, various diseases. But the main place I would say is, if you're going through a cancer diagnosis, then definitely speak to your oncologist. They'll be able to tell you whether they're participating in a trial, or if they're not, then they can refer you to someone who is, who does have that trial open. And so I, wouldn't hesitate to bring it up to my oncologist.
That's great.
Sure.
Awesome. And another question we gotten is COVID-19 still impacting how clinical trials are running? And can you do a trial virtually, which we've kind of touched on a little bit. But Tina, if you want to kind of jump in a little bit more with that as well.
The trial I'm doing, of course, I had to go into the facility to get a test done. And so I had to, participate in person. I do know that there's, a lot of different avenues, a lot of phone call interviews and doing quality of life type studies, and those sorts of things. The typical ones that, that I work with are treatment based. And so you, of course, have to come in for your treatment. And that sort of thing. But there's, it's definitely moving towards as much virtual that you can do. And even the audits that go on, the companies that are looking at the trial to make sure that you're doing things properly are being done virtually. And so really making the whole machinery function a little bit easier. And like Melissa said, is, a little silver lining around COVID is that we're, hopeful that continues, that we can continue to take advantage of those new avenues.
That's awesome. There is a question in here that I'll just answer now about finding the virtual exhibits. That information is always on our website at awareforall.org. It'll also be included in your follow-up email. So you'll be getting those links with all the educational resources and information from a lot of the groups that are participating today. And another question that we got was, talking a little bit about support systems and speaking to people who may have been a part of a clinical trial before you decide to participate. And I know there's a lot around, HIPAA and privacy and things like that, but there's lots of great support groups out there as well. And I know, Glenn, that you had some experience with that as well in terms of your diagnosis and where you kind of first went for that information, if you want to elaborate a little bit.
Absolutely. right after diagnosis, like anybody else, I had a million questions and wasn't really sure, where to go. And, pretty quickly came up with a short list of online resources and some support groups and discussion groups that looked legit, right? Um, People like me, people who are a little bit further ahead in the treatment plan than I am. So definitely very valuable. I reached out to LLS, having had prior experience with Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, and they actually put me in touch with what they call a first connection, who was someone who 10 years ago had been diagnosed and was basically, still in remission, but had been volunteering his time to talk to people like me who are newly diagnosed and are scared and have a zillion questions. So clinical trials definitely came up with that in that conversation as well. So that was very educational, but it was just an example of the kinds of resources that these support websites can bring to bear, right? It's not just web pages, but they can put you in touch with real people who have real experiences that bear on what your condition is and what your treatment plan is.
So I think we have time for one more question before we wrap up. And the question we have here is about compensation, and do all clinical trials pay people to participate? And what might that look like? So anyone feel free to answer. I know, Ashley, you touched on that and your compensation, but I know that can vary across the board.
All of the ones I participated in compensated. Standard seems to be about $75 a visit, as the average across the board. Research reached out to me to try to find someone to take part in a trial where it was inpatient. So you had to be in their inpatient facility, which is so cute. It's like a little house in South Decatur. It's so cute. Oh my God. It's really cozy, really comfy. I wish I could have gotten in on that trial. But it was like 6 weeks of inpatient, and it was $5,000 just compensated. So as far as I can tell, they've all been compensated. It would be weird for them not to, because it's a low risk by the time it gets to human trials, but like you are taking a risk and you are volunteering to put something not entirely tested into your body. So for a pharmaceutical company, who we all know what big pharma makes, it's an absurd amount of money. For them to not compensate for you to test their product that's going to make them a ginormous profit, probably, that would be really unusual and really not in their best interest.
I did want to add that compensation can be different, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to be a check in your pocket for an X amount of money, but it can be reimbursement for time or travel or vouchers, or in some instances, such as maybe an Alzheimer's study where, you have an older population and you need a caregiver, you need a car service, then you're compensated for that, or you're reimbursed for that, or your caregiver is given a stipend to help bring you to the study, to any screening visits or anything like that. So there's just different ways. And really, the good thing about clinical trials is you can also ask. So when you're going through that informed consent, and then if you get enrolled into the study, and you can say, hey, this is my situation. And we really try to make sure that we hit all the avenues, and on the back end, we're discussing like, hey, how can we compensate, or how can we help this patient who can't get here, or they have to fly across the country because there's only a site, 500 miles or 800 miles from them. So yeah, like plane tickets and all of those things. So it really depends on the study as well as your individual needs and sort of what the sites are contracted to do. But in most cases, as Terp was saying, they really want to make sure that, you feel comfortable in whatever you need to do in order to get there, and make sure that you feel valued. We're most likely going to try to do that.
Yeah, and like so much of it is removing barriers. In the first 2 trials I did, it seems to me like most trials for antidepressants are treating like ancillary antidepressants, a secondary drug. So my health insurance was not great at the time, nonprofit life. And I was having trouble refilling my regular antidepressants And that was something that the trial actually took care of because it was such a requirement that I be on a primary antidepressant. But they're like, no, 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 this cannot be, this, it needs to be a controlled thing. So like they were able to write that regular prescription for me, make sure that I was able to stay in refills, and then they actually gave me vouchers. So I got my regular prescriptions for free while I was in the trial to completely remove that barrier that would have messed with their results. So yeah, like there needs to be compensation of some variety, but it is also entirely in their best interest to facilitate you doing them the favor of volunteering your health to try this product.
That's a great point. And I know, as mentioned, it can vary to trial and where in the country you might be. So it's always in our best interest to be asking those questions, especially the study team, if that could be a barrier to participation for you. And with that, we are going to wrap up our panel discussion. I want to thank everybody for sharing their time and their stories with us today. I'd like to thank each of you for joining us at Aware for All Atlanta Day 2. Don't forget to visit our informational exhibit center to browse our educational handbook, visit our website for even more resources to continue your learning. And again, to the panelists, thank you for sharing your time today. Before we sign off and move on to our raffle portion, we have one more poll question today. It's another true or false. That only people who are sick can volunteer for a clinical trial. So we have a couple more moments here for everybody to answer and see, if we're testing our knowledge. And don't forget that we also have one more day of panels tomorrow and more opportunities to win great prizes. And we really encourage you guys to also follow us on social media to stay up to date on all things CISCRP. So that's CISCRP. Thank you to everybody who's answered the poll. Really exciting. And I have a couple more things just to share my closing remarks. Again, we really want to thank everybody for joining us this evening. Be sure to tune in tomorrow if you can join us from 6 to 7 p.m. for our second panel discussion, where you'll hear from more professionals and participants about their opportunities and their experiences with clinical research. So more questions you guys might have, you can offer those up again. We'll hopefully get to all of those. And we are going to move on to our raffle portion of the evening. We have a few fun items we're giving away. So the first is a $100 gift card to Walmart. And I believe our first winner is, if I can pull up the information here. We have two great polls tonight, which is really, two great prizes tonight, which is really awesome. So our first winner is Vicky Gray, $100 gift card to Walmart. So congratulations, Vicky. Be sure to check your email for more information. And our next raffle item is a $50 gift card to CVS. So the winner of this one is Kristen Gilly. Kristen, congratulations. We have our fun giveaways every night. So be sure to join us if you can for as many of these programs. And we'll also be emailing you guys after. So we have some information in our informational exhibit center as well about other fun prizes that are donated to us on behalf of our local supporters. And if you find the scavenger hunt as seen on your screen here, you are entered into a raffle to win some of those local prizes, but also a $150 gift card to Amazon. So really excited about that. We encourage you to visit our website and all the resources here to access that information. And we look forward to seeing you hopefully tomorrow night if you are able to join us. But as always, this information is available on our website. Recordings of the webinars, if you missed it or had to leave early or joined a little bit late, don't worry about that. But with that, we are going to wrap things up. I hope it will see you soon and have a great evening, everyone.
Thanks.
Take care.